A bounty hunter drags 3 bodies toward a small town. The townsfolk stare in shock, their eyes filled with disbelief. For such a brutal display of duty is something they've never seen before, and fear quickly spreads among them. The bounty hunter, Hex, arrives at the sheriff's office and calmly hands over his targets, but just as he's about to claim his reward, his employer puts on an arrogant face. Hex slowly raises his distinctive face, and when the townspeople recognize him, they hurriedly shut their doors and windows in panic. Yet, as the toughest bounty hunter in the West, Hex is no savage butcher. On the contrary, he always follows the rules and delivers his fugitives properly. However, the employer refuses to pay, claiming that one man is missing. To everyone's surprise, Hex presents the missing one in a different way. The employer takes one glance at it and almost throws up. Even though Hex has completed the job, the employer keeps nitpicking and delaying, backed by the sheriff and his men who act as his shield, making the employer fearless in his attempt to cheat Hex. Hex firmly declares that he has fulfilled the contract and must be paid $100 for each target before he leaves, but the employer sneers in disdain, believing a bounty hunter with no background isn't worth respecting. With regret in his eyes, Hex glances at the 5 coffins in the distance. Suddenly, 2 Gatling guns appear, freezing the arrogant men in place like living targets as they're riddled with bullets, turning the entire sheriff's office into a honeycomb. A sniper on the church roof keeps fighting back desperately, but Hex dodges the bullets with swift movements, then draws his revolver and sends the sniper to meet his maker with just 3 shots. At that moment, a poor vagabond rushes out and snatches the sniper's boots, and Hex, feeling pity, lets him go without pulling the trigger. Suddenly, a hidden gunman bursts out from a coffin, but Hex reacts instantly, firing 1 shot to send him back where he came from. Before leaving, Hex calmly collects the reward he's owed, for taking even a cent more would be an insult to his own integrity. Staring at the shiny sheriff's badge, Hex slowly takes it off and casually appoints a new lawman to take over. Just as Hex mounts his horse to leave, the not-quite-dead sheriff attempts a sneak attack, but Hex shoots him right between the eyes, then fires again at the gas boiler, causing the entire office to erupt in flames and turn to ashes. With a cold, effortless air, Hex rides off into the horizon, a ruthless man of few words. After that brutal incident, he became the man on every wanted poster, with a bounty as high as $500. But compared to his cold-blooded nature, there was someone in the West far more terrifying. A train loaded with weapons and soldiers thundered across the plains, and just as everyone began to relax, a young boy suddenly noticed a group of strangers approaching from outside the window. The passengers immediately sensed danger, staring in panic at the approaching outlaws. Yet the lieutenant remained calm, confident that with a 20-to-1 advantage, this would be an easy fight, something they'd never experienced before. But he underestimated the outlaws' cunning. Not far from the tracks, Burke was calmly placing explosives, so at ease it was clear he'd done this many times before. Inside the carriage, the blue-uniformed soldiers raised their guns in perfect unison, ready to wipe out the raiders, only to realize too late that there were 2 infiltrators among them. The traitors threw open their coats, revealing bodies strapped with explosives, instantly freezing the soldiers in terror. The rest of the outlaws took advantage of the chaos, forcing the train to a halt, detaching the weapon-filled engine from the passenger cars. Once they reached the explosives, Burke flipped the switch, and in an instant, soldiers, passengers, and the 2 infiltrators were all blown to pieces. Behind this perfect ambush stood the defeated Southern general, Turnbull. He orchestrated a series of violent attacks, spreading fear and chaos to turn the people against the government, hoping to seize the moment to rise again and reclaim power. The shocking events soon reached the president's ears. The enemy had already captured a large cache of weapons and was plotting to take over an arms factory. If they succeeded, the consequences would be unimaginable. To eliminate this dangerous faction once and for all, they needed someone who had a personal grudge against General Turnbull, a man decisive, skilled, and fearless. The president already had someone in mind, the man who wiped out an entire sheriff's office, Hex. Years ago, Hex accidentally killed Turnbull's son, Jeb. Turnbull retaliated by slaughtering Hex's entire family, leaving the scars that now mark his face. Hex had once been a decorated soldier in the Southern ranks and one of Turnbull's most trusted men. He knew his enemy inside and out. If Hex learned that Turnbull was still alive, he would stop at nothing to avenge his family. It was a plan too tempting for the government to ignore. Meanwhile, a weary and disillusioned Hex wandered into a small town. His miserable attempt to drink away his pain quickly caught the eyes of 2 nearby cowboys. One of them scoffed, thinking Hex didn't look as tough as the rumors said, probably just a paper tiger. Before his friend could stop him, he swaggered over with a knife to provoke Hex. That arrogance cost him his life. Afterward, Hex went upstairs, where his soulmate Lila had just finished her business with a client. The man, still unsatisfied, wanted to keep her for himself. But Lila refused, though she lived a hard life. She longed for real strength and courage in a man. After driving the man out with her pistol, Lila greeted her next visitor. This time, the scarred man before her matched her taste perfectly. Moments ago she had been prickly and defensive, but as soon as she lay in Hex's arms, she melted into a gentle, affectionate kitten. Lost in love, Lila dreamed of running away with Hex to start a new life somewhere no one knew them, but Hex refused. Everyone connected to him met a tragic end, and he wouldn't let the woman he loved suffer the same fate. Lila understood his pain, and tried to ease his darkness the only way she knew. After a night of passion, Hex got up to leave, ready to return to his aimless, hollow life. Angry and heartbroken, Lila gave him an ultimatum: if he came again, she might already be gone, and perhaps that was what Hex truly wanted. Before he could even finish dressing, a squad of blue-coated soldiers burst through the door. Hex remained calm, smirking as he joked that someone had delivered a package quite early today. The soldiers, fully aware of who they were dealing with, quickly explained their mission. The president himself had requested his service, with a generous reward. Hex, long disgusted with war, immediately refused and warned them sternly to leave if they valued their lives. With no choice left, one soldier mentioned a single name: Turnbull. At that moment, Hex's eyes blazed with fury. The soldier hurriedly clarified that General Turnbull was still alive, shocking Hex to his core. Rumor had it Turnbull died in a fire. Could it have all been a lie he staged himself? To uncover the truth, Hex accepted the president's offer, finally finding a new purpose in his life. When two army officers lost a lead after a captured outlaw died under interrogation, a scar-faced bounty hunter stepped forward, claiming he could make the dead talk. The officers froze in disbelief, warning him that the man had been dead for quite some time. But Hex stayed calm and placed his hand on the corpse's arm, and unbelievably, the dead man came back to life. Hex casually asked how things had been on the other side. Though Hex was deadly with a gun, his most unusual skill was his ability to bring the dead briefly back to the world of the living. Terrified and overwhelmed by Hex's presence, the outlaw finally confessed that his boss was Slocum. At once, Hex remembered the name. Slocum had once been his most trusted comrade, now a traitor working with his mortal enemy, General Turnbull. As the outlaw's decaying body began to crumble again, Hex scooped up a handful of dirt and placed it on the man's head, allowing him to finally rest in peace. After discovering Slocum's hideout, Hex decided to pay his old friend a visit, since at this point, Slocum might be the only one who knew General Turnbull's whereabouts. The two officers in blue were dumbfounded. Could a man really get answers by questioning the dead? Hex calmly told them they could try it for themselves if they didn't believe him. Puzzled, the officers went to investigate, but no matter how they looked, they couldn't figure out what Hex had done. When they turned back, ready to curse him for being a fraud, Hex had already vanished without a trace. By then, Hex was galloping toward a place known as the Battle Camp, a brutal underground fighting arena run by Slocum. Stopping by a river for a drink, he was suddenly flooded with memories of the scar on his face. To erase the brand that Turnbull had burned into him, Hex once pressed a red-hot axe blade against his wound, cutting it open again. That was how he ended up with the terrifying visage he bore today. Upon reaching his destination, Hex handed over all his belongings and stepped into the camp, just in time to witness a bloody fight between two muscular men. But one of them clearly wasn't normal. Slocum was forcing them to fight to the death, making huge profits through ruthless betting. The cruelty of it all filled Hex with rage. He soon confronted Slocum directly, skipping any greeting and going straight to the point. He wanted to know where General Turnbull was hiding. The tension in the ring mirrored the hostility between the two men. Slocum sneered that Turnbull was already dead and that everyone knew it, so Hex should stop chasing ghosts. But Hex was certain the general still lived. To break his confidence, Slocum brought up the past, mocking Hex for killing his best friend Jeb, the very same Jeb who was Turnbull's son. The mention of that name stung, though Hex carried the guilt. He had no choice back then. As the brutal fight below reached its climax, so too did their confrontation. Even with two gunmen pressing their weapons against his head, Hex didn't flinch. His resolve was iron. When the brawl in the pit finally ended, Hex asked one last time where Turnbull was. Slocum, arrogant to the end, mocked him even harder. That was the final straw. It was time for Hex to show his true power, and in the end, Slocum became the victim of his own evil. As Hex walked out coolly, he spotted several guards tormenting a dog. Enraged, he immediately stepped in and beat the bullies to the ground. The dog, realizing Hex had saved it, quickly recognized him as its new master. It leapt to attack the last guard, and moments later, The entire fight camp was engulfed in flames. The den of sin burned to ashes behind them as Hex and the loyal dog rode away together. To uncover Turnbull's true location, Hex knew he had to consult another dead man. Before long, he arrived at a cemetery and dug up the grave of his old friend Jeb, using his strange gift to reunite the living and the dead. But Jeb, still filled with hatred, lunged at Hex the moment he rose. Fortunately, Hex grabbed a nearby shovel and struck him down. Without his flesh to anchor him, Jeb's spirit quickly faded, but after a moment of thought, Hex revived him again. Jeb was still full of anger, forcing Hex to restrain him until he calmed down. Once the tension eased, Hex helped his old friend to his feet. Even the deepest grudges can fade when forged in years of shared battle. Hex explained what had truly happened. Turnbull had once ordered him to destroy a field hospital filled with innocent people. Both sides had already lost too much to the war, and Hex couldn't bear to kill anymore. He disobeyed the order, but Jeb insisted on carrying it out. Left with no choice, Hex pulled the trigger. He had never forgiven himself for that moment. As penance, he had watched Turnbull burn his entire family alive. Hearing the truth, Jeb's anger began to melt into guilt. Hex then revealed the full extent of Turnbull's atrocities, finally opening Jeb's eyes to who his father truly was. Before his revived body could crumble again, Jeb told Hex where Turnbull was hiding. Just before returning to his grave, he urged Hex to live on and then faded back into silence, knowing the battle ahead would almost certainly claim his life. Hex whispered a final farewell. Armed with the location, he rode off at full speed. By that time, Turnbull's ambition had reached its peak. He led his men in a surprise night raid on the exposition, stealing a devastating new weapon that could annihilate entire cities. His dream of seizing control of the nation was close to becoming reality. Hex knew he couldn't face such an army alone, so he visited a weapons dealer, seeking a weapon powerful enough to destroy multiple enemies at once. The man presented him with the newest, deadliest model, a true masterpiece of destruction. Hex grinned, satisfied, and rode straight toward Turnbull's fortress. He silently took down 2 guards at the gate and slipped inside. When he saw the blueprints of the massive weapon, he was stunned. Meanwhile, in another warehouse, Turnbull was proudly inspecting the completed version, confident that with this weapon, overthrowing the government was only a matter of time. Their secret conversation reached Hex's sharp ears. Following the voices, he crept closer until he spotted a familiar silhouette at the corner. Sensing danger, Turnbull turned and their eyes met. Filled with shock and hatred, Turnbull roared for his men to kill him. Hex pulled out his new weapon and unleashed a storm of gunfire. The long-awaited battle for revenge had finally begun. After clearing out the guards blocking his path, Hex pushed forward, but Turnbull had already escaped. Firing off his last few rounds in frustration, Hex stormed out of the bunker. Outside, he caught sight of Turnbull again and raised his gun to shoot. But from the side, Burke fired first, his bullet striking Hex. Smirking arrogantly, Burke aimed to finish the job, only to realize Hex had vanished. The ghostly bounty hunter's sudden disappearance sent chills through every gunman present. Burke's confidence quickly turned to panic. Hex reappeared out of nowhere, taking down one of the men instantly. The others searched nervously, terrified by the unseen threat. Still, even the strongest warrior can't fight forever surrounded and wounded again. Hex's situation looked hopeless. Burke, regaining his bravado, laughed and taunted him mercilessly. Just as he prepared to fire the final shot, Hex summoned every last ounce of strength and fired at a nearby crate of explosives. Burke, too arrogant to notice, kept mocking him and casually picked up a lit stick of dynamite from the same crate. When he turned to throw it at Hex, he realized his enemy had disappeared once more. Panic struck as Burke stumbled around shouting, clutching the explosive. Meanwhile, Hex crawled into a drainage tunnel, whistled for his horse, and rode away into the darkness. Burke climbed up the fortress wall, realizing too late that Hex had already escaped. Enraged, he hurled a stick of dynamite after him, but it exploded midair, bursting into a single, lonely firework. Was Hex alive or dead? And if he survived, how would he finally avenge his family? From the red earth, Hex's scarred face slowly emerged. He rose to his feet as his mortal enemy, Turnbull, stared in shock. One was the executioner who murdered his wife and child. The other, the man who killed his only son. Here, on the blood-red soil, their fates would be decided. Beside them, a black coffin waited quietly, ready for its new occupant. The 2 men clashed fiercely, but Hex, younger and stronger, soon gained the upper hand. He quickly overpowered his old commander, and just as he raised his weapon to finish the job, Turnbull drew a revolver and fired several rounds. The long, bitter dream of revenge ended in failure. Hex was gravely wounded, writhing in pain, and on the verge of death. His loyal dog ran around helplessly, not knowing what to do. At the critical moment, Hex's father-in-law and his native tribe came to the rescue, pulling him back from the brink. Their ritual was unlike any ordinary treatment. It was mysterious and almost otherworldly. As they worked to save him, flashes of memory filled Hex's mind, the laughter of his wife and son, the warmth of a home long lost. But those precious moments had been destroyed by Turnbull's own hands. Driven by vengeance, Hex awoke once more. Through the tribe's strange and sacred ritual, Hex was reborn. He coughed violently and from his mouth flew a black crow, the very symbol of death. From that moment, the vengeful spirit of Hex had returned. Hex mounted his horse and rode off toward his enemy, sending word to the president along the way that Turnbull planned to attack Washington with his ultimate weapon. Meanwhile, the fallen general was testing that weapon's power. He chose a random western town as his target, raining several shells down from above. Strangely, they didn't explode. Curious townsfolk emerged from the church, staring at the strange objects that had fallen from the sky. Before they could figure out what they were, Turnbull held up a gleaming, crystal-like warhead, small but devastatingly powerful. With smug pride, he ordered it launched. A single yellow shell shot through the air, landed in the town, and triggered the others to detonate. In an instant, the entire town vanished in a roaring blast, over 300 lives reduced to smoke. Turnbull watched the destruction unfold, his face twisted in satisfaction. The horrifying news quickly reached the president, but even he was powerless. He could only hope for a hero to rise, a savior who could rescue the nation from despair. That hero arrived that very night. Hex rode to Turnbull's heavily guarded harbor, the crows circling above, a sign that death had come. With brutal precision, he dispatched the gate guards, burying an axe in one man's skull before sneaking inside. There, he saw a colossal warship being readied for departure, its deck loaded with deadly ammunition. Turnbull was preparing to sail for the East Coast, to bombard Washington itself. Seeing the scale of his enemy's ambition, Hex knew he had to stop them. As he crept through the ship, Burke caught sight of him, and the two men clashed instantly. One was the man who had executed Hex's wife, the other a desperate killer eager to prove his superiority. Each carried his own hatred and both wanted to end the other's life. But Hex, battered and aging, couldn't match Burke's strength. Even so, fate once again favored justice. At the crucial moment, Hex used his dark powers to knock Burke off balance, then grabbed him and shoved him into the spinning propeller, avenging his wife's death in the most brutal way. To ensure the man's soul would never escape, Hex invoked his ritual once more, turning Burke's body to ash. With his greatest threat gone, Hex set out to confront Turnbull himself. He crept onto the main deck, where the general was riling up his men. Just as Hex was about to strike, Turnbull sensed danger, turned, and seized Lila as a human shield. During Hex's recovery, Burke had kidnapped her on Turnbull's orders. He knew she was Hex's weakness. Seeing her in danger, Hex dropped his weapon and surrendered without hesitation. But Turnbull didn't kill him. He wanted Hex alive to witness his triumph, his new world born from destruction. The massive warship soon reached the American coast. While the president was giving a speech to calm the public, in the ship's hold, Hex grew desperate, bound and powerless. He could only watch until Lila revealed a hidden talent. With effortless skill, she picked her cuffs. She smirked and told him she'd learned that trick from plenty of men before. Hex couldn't help but be impressed. He had underestimated her. Outside, the Navy had spotted the rogue warship and demanded its surrender, warning the crew they'd be charged with treason if they didn't comply. But Turnbull wasn't one to back down. He ordered his men to fire. A massive 6-barrel cannon rose from the deck.
Fire at will. Detonate.
Its sheer power obliterating the Navy ship before it could even return fire. Meanwhile, Hex and Lila broke free, took down the guards, and split up to stop Turnbull's plan. Fueled by rage, Lila fought like a woman possessed, cutting down anyone who stood in her way. No trace of her former life remained. Hex, dual revolvers blazing, stormed across the deck until his guns ran dry. He then grabbed a flamethrower, setting enemies ablaze without hesitation. As Turnbull's crew prepared to fire the final, devastating warhead, Hex dove forward to stop them but was nearly hit by enemy fire. Turnbull ambushed him from behind, and the two crashed through the deck into the ship's lower chamber. Turnbull managed to launch the warhead, its trajectory aimed straight for the heart of Washington. Explosions rocked the city as shells rained down near the Capitol. Crowds scattered in terror as chaos filled the streets. Lila, filled with determination, faced off against a towering guard. refusing to retreat even as the weapon fired toward the White House. Meanwhile, Turnbull pummeled Hex mercilessly, then ordered his men to detonate the remaining ammo. The massive cannon began to charge again. During the struggle, Hex recalled the dream that had haunted him for years, but this time, he knew how it would end. Lila reached for a nearby axe but lost her grip. The weapon fell and landed right in front of Hex. He seized it and struck back with everything he had. The tide turned instantly. Hex overpowered Turnbull, then hurled the axe straight into the cannon's mechanism, jamming it. Grabbing his enemy, he forced Turnbull into the ship's grinding gears, finally avenging his wife and son. The ultimate warhead detonated moments later. Hex and Lila leapt into the sea just in time as the massive ship erupted behind them. The sky lit up in flames like fireworks, ending the rebellion in a storm of fire and light. Far away, stunned citizens stared into the glowing horizon. In the aftermath, Hex was personally commended by the president, who handed him a generous reward. Wanting to keep Hex close, the president offered him a badge, inviting him to serve the nation as its protector. But Hex, too used to his freedom, refused with a wry smile. As he turned to leave, he said quietly, "If you ever need me, I'll be around." Before riding off, Hex visited his old friend Jeb's grave. He whispered an apology, then mounted his horse and disappeared into the western horizon, returning to the life of a lone bounty hunter. I'm a film enthusiast. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.